Thank you, Jen. Was a very interesting talk as well. You can see these two different situations from the Western Alaska and Southeastern Alaska. Before going into the discussion, I'd like to possibly ask Richard if he would be able to talk about what's going on a little bit more of South Africa in terms of avoidance. What are the skippers doing?
Wow, that puts me on a bit of a spot.
Yeah, sorry.
Right, there have been observations of whales for the last 5 years or so. And that information at the moment is being processed. It was supposed to have been tabled a little while ago, a couple of months ago, but it hasn't come through yet, which is unfortunate. That might have been useful. There's also, as you know, some cooperation with yourself. There have been cameras out there. There's been one tag which has yielded interesting information about both diving depths and also movement of one particular animal so far. And there'll be 3 tags probably going into the water very shortly for the rest of this year. You know, as far as hello? I don't think we have anything to teach much for the Capsulitaria system, because that really has made a dramatic difference to the fishery. And you know, we're following things with great interest. I think what does come out of these, you know, out of the discussion so far is the tremendous importance of looking at this now on a global scale, and also learning from some of the other fisheries elsewhere in the world, because clearly that's going to be a very productive exercise as well. And I think, you know, the other thing that we really want to do is to think seriously about how we're going to drive the matter from here. But presumably that will be our next, you know, our next discussion. But I think we should all start seriously thinking about the CSWAP approach. And I have a question, perhaps, since you had a question for me.
Go ahead.
And the question is, the CSWAP process, how is it financed at the moment, and what does it cost?
Did you get that?
Okay.
I can. Is this on? Yes.
Yep.
So, how is it financed? Good question. It is grant funded primarily. So, and some of the Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association, Jeff is part of, does help. It's our industry partner out of Sitka, but we also have industry partners out of other areas. So we have been really fortunate in being able to continue this project because of really good grant writers and a good team of people that work together well, and we have a good reputation in the state. And the North Pacific, it took us 10 years to get our initial funding. We started this in 1996 or 7, right after the IFQs were implemented. So it took us a long time to get our foot in the door. And finally we did with the North Pacific Research Board, which is it's not exactly federal money, but it's a pool of federal money, and it's based out of Anchorage. And so they were really supportive. And so that's what we did for a few years. And also my partner, colleague in that Scripps Institution, oceanographer, is a really sharp acoustical I guess, a mind, and he has been able to secure ONR, Office of Naval Research funding, the BREP money, the bycatch money. So we pulled in other pots of money to, and we've also expanded to Hawaii. We have a project looking at the false killer whale, and hopefully I'll have a chance to show some of that footage, because we captured some really nice false killer whales taking bait off the Hawaiian longline fishery. And also the Central Bering Sea Fishermen's Association, which is way up in the Bering Sea, has funded us to do work off of Sitka for the sperm whales, with hopes that what we've learned off Sitka will help their killer whale issue as well. So that's basically, in essence, is grant money.
And what would your annual budget be?
Boy, that's really variable. Right now, it's not all that high for as many people as we have involved. I should probably get that number in terms of it, and it's going to fluctuate. You notice the effort graph that I had with the discovery curve? That basically reflects our funding. So our grant this year is, we have a 2-year grant for $300,000. And I think the BREP money, we probably have $100,000 in those, probably 2 of those, so maybe 500,000. So.
Yeah, Rhys?
Thanks, Paul. Good question, Richard. And I suppose following on from that, a question to Jeff. I'm wondering if you might be able to describe the Alaska Longline Fishers Association and how that is set up and funded as well.
You got me? 1, 2, 1, 2? Okay. So the Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association is an industry association group, and so it's mostly made up of longliners that fish halibut and sablefish, also do some other longlining, but most of our members also fish salmon. A lot of the boats in Southeast and a lot of boats, the smaller boats in Alaska also fish multiple species, but we just kind of focus on the federal end of the IFQ species. The funding is, I don't know how COLTO works in other groups, but our membership fees can't fund this work. So we are very heavily grant dependent from different kind of government associations, from NOAA through the bycatch reduction projects, through Stolten Kennedy. There's a bunch of acronyms I could probably throw at you too, but the short story is funding from some NGOs, because we have multiple projects going on. This is one of our biggest ones and one of our most collaborative ones. And I'll show again the list of people involved. So between the academia and the government and NGO, but I know the amount of money coming into our organization has increased as our projects have increased and we've become more collaborative. So, you know, I don't know if that quite answers it, but we are just a fishery association that are very active in a number of issues that keep our communities pumping. Yeah.
So I forgot to show, I was going to show this one slide, and it tells it all, I think. Just keep it up on the board. Oops, it's not coming up on there.
Is that what?
So that's what you want to show, right? They should treat me. All right, any more comments? I actually wanted to get the background of, especially the skippers, about what they feel about what Megan has presented, like the direct cost, you know, of playing cat and mouse with the whales. Yeah.
Well, from our perspective, just that, as I explained yesterday, any estimates of loss to whales is included in our TAC. So what Megan was explaining would not apply to us, but it's an interesting point. And it would be good to know what that percentage, that $546 per set, what percentage that would be. But it has made me think that I could probably go back and work out, or get our financial manager to work out what our 3% estimated depredation does cost in terms of our overall operating costs.
Yeah, Rhys?
From an Australian perspective, as you all know, we don't experience a lot of depredation, and I don't have any figures on what the costs might be, but it's relatively new for us, and over the last few years we've had to convince our skippers that while it's not a big problem at the moment, we don't want it to turn into a bigger problem in the future, and so we encourage them to move early on. Some of them took that encouragement quite literally, and others thought it was just a suggestion. So we've been working with our skippers, educating them, showing them the potential of what can happen, such as with the Crozet and Kerguelen fisheries. And one of the ways that we have taught them, not taught them, but one of the ways that we've got them to agree to move on without kind of kicking up a bit of a fit, was that we actually provide our skippers with an incentive bonus. So if they catch above a certain tonnage per day across the trip, then they get an extra bonus for that. So we do that on a catch per day basis, and we then tell them if you have to move for whales, which us as a company are implementing because of the company's ownership of that resource and their protection for the long term, you shouldn't be penalised for that. And so your skipper's bonus won't include any time lost for moving from whales. So that's worked for us. It means that the skippers are incentivised accordingly. It's in their best interest in the short term to catch as much fish as they can, but also then it helps the company and the fishery in the long term that they're not encouraging the whales and allowing them to learn that there's a free or an easy feed associated with our vessels. So just not quite on the topic, but along similar lines anyway.
I think it's an important point because we did the same for the French fishery. You've seen across the presentations that of the Kerguelen Island, the depredation issue comes from sperm whale only. Levels are already quite high, but for the killer whales it's negligible at the moment. And we got some observations of whales, killer whales that were observed off the Crozet Island that started to depredate off the Kerguelen Island. And that was a big warning. Like, those whales are able to travel long distances. If the depredation issue is moving from one fishing ground to another, and Kerguelen is like 90% of the total quota for that fishery, that will be the end of the fishery. Because if we reach similar levels for the killer whales of the Kerguelen, then it's not sustainable anymore. So what the government did and the fishery managers did exactly the same system. It's like it was implementing a non-reward policy for the killer whales. Every time they see a killer whale, they have to move and to leave it and move on a distance that is great enough, even if they come back a week or 2 weeks later. But yeah, not to encourage the whales of doing depredation of the Kerguelen Islands. So yeah, it's the key here, and they got also a fee if they don't respect that measure, because that will impact the whole fishery. If one boat doesn't respect that, the whole fishery is impacted. Yeah. So. Yep, Megan.
I think that's really interesting. Okay, no, it is. I think it's really interesting that that's been sort of a policy implemented, because, and I would say it's a little different, and it's just a standard practice in Western Alaska, because killer whales in particular, you just don't want to fish through them. It's not a sound, and I don't know if that has to do with smaller number of vessels, tighter management in the Crozet Kerguelen. So it's just an interesting comparison. The fishermen have implemented that pretty much on their own. Yeah. But, you know, and obviously the economic costs are really going to be associated very tightly with the severity of the issue. I would say more often than not, unless the sperm whales are really bad, folks will fish through the sperm whales. So it's maybe a little bit simpler in looking at the costs. But if you're looking at then the cost of moving and waiting and all those other things that I discussed in the project, then it's not as simple of a picture, but it's an important picture to consider. Obviously, people are still fishing, so it's still worth their while, and that has, I think, a lot to do with the high value per pound of these fisheries. But yeah, trying to figure out how to minimize those costs, I suppose, while still effectively avoiding depredation is the key going forward until we get a perfect decoy or deterrent, you know, going.
Yeah, Jen?
They have the numbers, the dollar numbers. So the CPUE gave an upper and lower bound in this paper that we wrote for the ICES paper, or journal, and the upper bound is, and this is based on a set, based on 2,300 hooks lost per set. So the upper bound is a little, let's say, the kilograms is about 5 to 16 kilograms per set. And the economic value of that ranges between per 100 hooks. So it's on the upper order of about $1,000 per set. And the lower bound is about $300 per set. So that's a range you're thinking of per set. And that doesn't take in the economic loss. That's just a loss to the fish, a lost fish that you aren't bringing to the dock. So if you have to go back out and fish, and that's the added cost of the other vessel stuff that Megan was talking about. So I hope that makes sense. So it gets a little complicated.
What I wanted to say as well is that I've been sailing on different vessels and with different captains, and it was so interesting to get the insight on that issue. And what I observed is that different skippers have a totally different way of dealing with depredation. And one of them, the last one I was with, that was a couple of years ago, he had this strategy of setting his line in different spots, and like in 3 different spots. Those 3 different spots were distant from one another of about 100 kilometers away. And what we would do is it would get to those fishing grounds, set his line on the first one, then move to the second one, set his line as well, move to the third one, set his lines as well, and we'll come back to the first one, start holding. If whales were not around and the catch was good enough, it would remain into that very first spot. But as soon as the whales would show up, it would move, leave the gear and move to the second spot. And this way it would keep fishing. I mean, you didn't have to wait for another setting session, and it would keep going like this. But this is how, this is why, I mean, what Megan did is important, is that at the end, is it actually gaining, like he's having a very low interaction rate with the whales, that is minimal whale presence around this vessel, but is kind of wasting time traveling between those different spots to avoid the whales. And the main idea here, and I'm going to talk to you about that a little bit further this afternoon, it's to quantify those either benefits of having less whales, but also the cost of traveling more between fishing grounds. Yeah. Yep.
I think we also have to take into account that in some areas there's a very low density of fishing boats, and they're not there all the time. In the Prince Edward and Marion Island, there are 2 vessels. They're not there right through the year. In the past, in fact, the vessel wasn't there at all, normally between April and September. And so you had a completely different profile on the fishery as far as the fleet was concerned. On Crozet, I believe you catch for 11 months of the year. There's a constant presence. So, you know, as far as a sort of food source is concerned for the whales, that was a completely different bet. And I think we must also take into account the different communities that we're dealing with. I mean, in Alaska, from what I've read about it, these are small fishing communities. I imagine that they see quite a lot of each other ashore, and they probably cooperate very, very well. They're quite close. In many other areas, you know, the fisherman, the fishing master is the guy who absolutely sits in the hot seat. He's judged in a completely, how can I say, transparent manner. Every time he lands fish, he has to answer to his wife, to his company, and to pretty much everybody else. It's a tough job. And, you know, to expect them, in many cases, to cooperate very closely with each other is something which they are reluctant to do. They don't like sharing current information. And we just must take this into account, because we might be able to give information, we might be able to give advice, we might be able to do a whole lot of things, but, you know, the final shot actually is with the fishing masters.
Definitely. Yeah. John? Yeah, you were talking about the fleet size. Actually, we've been running some analysis about that, and there is a distinction between the fleet level and the vessel level. we observed that if the whole fleet is actually operating at the same time off the Crozet Island, you get a much lower depredation at the fleet level. That is, there is some kind of a dilution effect. You got a limited number of whales that are available for depredating on long lines, and it's gambling. You're going to have one vessel is going to have a very high depredation rate, but if you look at the fleet level, the depredation is lower. Yep.
Yeah, and maybe I should have said this earlier, mentioned it because it plays right into this. We have an 8-month season. I described that. We're on an ITQ system now. But one interesting stat is a lot of the fleet goes out right off the bat. One, they're hungry. They haven't been out fishing. They need to pay bills. But also, seems to be lower encounters. But there's a bulk of the fleet out there. And the fishing's pretty good because no one's been out there. We're seeing about 2/3 of our total TAC for that area caught in the first 2.5 months. And then as the season goes on, there's fewer boats spread out. And it kind of plays into not a one-size-fits-all approach when we're looking at deterrence or avoidance or whatnot, depending on how many boats are around. So yeah, we just see that same thing.
Yeah, Chris? Nope. Any more question, comment? Yeah, the point here is really to try to identify the best, strategy and working on the behavior of vessels. Then we're going to talk about the technical developments. But from our experience of the French areas, there was a key component of the analysis is to work on those behavior, because the main question was, do we have to train skippers, based on the results we have, or is it something that is totally different than, that's nothing to do with the behavior of the vessels, and this is when the technical component comes in. So that was the first step to us to work on those behavioral patterns of the fishery around the French areas. Yeah. Good. All right, maybe let's move on to the coffee break. Yeah. Coffee.